Hey everyone, Alameo here, and today we're going to talk about decks. Why? In parallel, you can have many different types of decks and with many different types of factions as well. But when it comes time to build your deck, if you're unsure, don't worry, because the official Parallel website has an option called Parallel Creator Decks. Here's how it works. After you download the game and complete the entire tutorial, you have the option to come to the website and choose one deck to play from the 10 creator decks available here. These decks were created by players who play Parallel professionally, have a lot of experience, and have thoroughly studied all the cards. They also clearly show which faction and which paragon they use, what the deck's focus is, and the name of the creator who owns that deck. I chose the Control Queen Niamh deck by Jarla, and it's a deck that's completely focused on control. If you want to take a look, you can come up here to the top option, View Deck, and check out the deck before selecting it to play. It will show you all the cards it has, and then you can decide whether you want to play with that deck or not. So now let's go take a look at this deck, and I'll show you everything in detail. When you claim your deck on the website, it automatically comes to you in the game, complete, with the exact sequence of cards that the player created for it. Up here, it will show you the total number of units, relics, upgrades, and effects you have, as well as the number of cards you own, organized by the energy cost to use them, and everything laid out clearly. So here, it shows you all the energy costs. The deck I chose is completely focused on control and heavily centered around Niamh's ability. Why is that? Niamh is the paragon we're going to use here, and she has a summon cost of 9 energy points, 6 attack, and 6 health. But the most important thing here is the abilities that Niamh has. Why is that? When you manage to summon her onto the field, she comes with the Battle Ready ability. As soon as she's summoned, she can attack in the same turn. This makes a huge difference because, depending on your opponent's life points, it can really help you in a battle. She also has the Evasive ability. This ability means she can't be targeted by any of your opponent's effects. These are the active abilities she has. She also has a really good and very important ability, which is this one right here. For each effect, relic, and upgrade that I have used in the match, I can summon a random unit card from any faction with the same cost. So that means if I play 10 unit cards with a cost of 5, when I summon Niamh, I can also get 5 units from any faction in the game and summon them, also with a cost of 5. So, in this case, for the 10 units I summoned, I'll be able to summon another 10 from any faction with the same energy cost. Another very important ability, which makes a huge difference for Niamh, is this one right here. For every effect, relic, and upgrade that I've used during the match, I can pick and summon a random unit from any faction in the game with the same energy cost. So, let's say I've played 10 effect cards during the match with a cost of 3. I'll be able to summon 10 units with a cost of 3 from any faction in the game. This is really important. Why? Because when we summon Niamh, she already comes into play ready for battle, and during these other summons, you might get more cards with battle readiness. In other words, when you summon these cards, you could end up winning the game simply because of the number of units you'll have on your board. Besides that, of course, if you get a card with Defender, even better. Why? Because if you can't finish off your opponent in that round, when it's their turn and they come to attack you, they'll be facing a really crowded board on your side, and they'll have to worry about that and try to clear it as quickly as possible. So this card here makes a huge difference. Now, a very important point about this Paragon is the following, her passive ability. If the deck can't include cards that cost 6 or more energy, in other words, the deck is limited to cards that cost up to 5 energy. If I add any card that costs 6, I can't use Niamh, the Bearer of Faith. Now let's move on to the effect cards. My deck has 22 effect cards, and since my deck is 100% focused on control and value generation, which means generating energy and resources so I can do more during the match until I summon Niamh. We start with the first card, which is Take or Leave. This card works as follows. It has a 0 cost, and during the turn it's played, it gives me an extra energy point. But there's a condition. This card can only be played starting from the 4th turn. In other words, from the 4th turn on, this card can actually be played and we can gain that extra energy point. I have 3 of these cards in my deck because they're very important, especially since my deck has a relatively high cost and my Paragon needs a lot of energy to be summoned. So just with these, I can already generate 3 energy points for the turn at 0 cost, if I have all 3. The next card is also a 0 cost card. The game is completely in Portuguese, guys. There are some translations that have a few bugs, but this card works as follows. Its name is No Snitching, and it's used to remove all effects from a unit that costs up to 4 energy points, except for exemplars, of course, and that includes keywords as well. So, if my opponent has a unit card with some ability, like, for example, Defender or an ability that generates attack and defense points for that card or for its allies, I can go ahead and use No Snitching to remove those abilities from the card and feel a bit more at ease. That way, I have greater control over my opponent's units and what they can do to me. We also have 3 copies of this card in the deck because we need a lot of effects. The next card is Niamh's Dominion. This card can only be included in your deck if you have Niamh, the Bearer of Faith, as your Paragon, your Exemplar, and it has an energy cost. This card works as follows. All the remaining energy you have that turn will be used to deal damage to every unit on the field. That means your opponent's units and your own units as well. And of course, if any unit happens to be destroyed because of this damage, it gets banished. And you need to pay close attention to this. If any of your units are destroyed and banished during that attack, you will lose 2 life points for each unit that gets banished. One reassuring thing is that the effect caused by this card can't reduce our life below 1, meaning it can't kill either us or our opponent. So, it's all good, and those 2 points of damage will also be dealt to our opponent. The next card is Life Siphon. It also has an energy cost and works as follows. Deal 2 damage to the target unit, and if the damage destroys the unit, it is banished. If the enemy has at least 2 more units than you, the cost is reduced by 1. In other words, if our opponent has 2 more units than us on the field, instead of costing 1 energy to play this card, it will cost 0. And something very important here is this banishment. Folks, why is that? Because we have a unit, which I'll show you in a bit, that benefits a lot from each banishment that happens during the match. So, these cards that are causing banishment are going to generate a lot of value for one of our units. Our next effect card is Collateral Damage. This card is extremely simple. It costs 2 to use. and its purpose is to destroy our opponent's relic. So, let's say our opponent is also playing a deck focused on relic and effect cards, and they have a really important relic on the field that's giving a big buff to their cards. This card here will allow us to destroy our opponent's relic and regain control of the entire board. The next card is also a very important card for us, because it's another card that enables banishment. It's the card called Erasure. It costs 3 energy, and we can banish a target unit card. In other words, this target unit card can be either ours or our opponent's. We select it, and it will be banished from the match. Let's say you're at a point in the game where you really need a lot of attack points. This card here will generate attack points if it's combined with a unit that benefits from banishments. The next card is Treacherous Scheme. This card here is really good for controlling our opponent's hand. This card lets us look at our opponent's hand, take one of their cards, and put it into our singularity, which is basically our banishment zone. But here comes the most important part. If the card is a unit, we add a corrupted copy of that unit to our hand. In other words, with this card, we can decide what our opponent will have in their hand, and if they only have one unit, we can take that unit from their hand and add it to ours as a corrupted unit. Finally, the last effect card we're going to use is Triumph of the Lost. It costs 5 energy and works as follows. If it's the first time we're using this effect in the turn, we'll be able to create a copy of the last effect, relic, and unit that our opponent used. The only exception is exemplars. We can't copy exemplars, but aside from that, we can copy all 3 cards. This card is very important because it helps power up the endgame and lets us finish as quickly as possible. Now let's talk about the relics we have in our deck. In our deck, we're only going to have one relic card, which is the most important relic for us to use our deck in the best way possible, and that's the Stabilized Shard. It costs 2 energy, which means we can use it extremely quickly, and it will really help us with energy generation. Why is that? When we use this card, it creates an exception to the energy generation rule. Because in parallel, you can only place 1 card per turn in the energy generation pile, but by using the Stabilized Shard, you're allowed to put more than 1 card there at a time. So you'll be able to generate 2 energy points each turn that it's on the field. This card is really important if you want to have more energy during matches and reach the end of the game as quickly as possible. And, of course, it will stay there until it's destroyed or removed from the field by your opponent. Now let's talk about the units. In our deck, we have 17 unit cards, which are the characters we'll use to deal damage to our opponent's cards and, of course, to the opponent themselves to finish the match as quickly as possible. The first card we have here is the Embedded Agent. The Embedded Agent has an evasive skill, which means that defending units can't block her attacks. In other words, we can attack whoever we want with this agent. She also has the lethal ability. Any damage she deals will destroy the enemy unit. She has 1 attack point, 1 defense point, and costs 1 energy point. So we have 3 of these cards in our deck. The next card is the Singularity Overseer. This is the card I mentioned earlier that really benefits from banishments during the match. Why is that? Because when this card is played on the field, for every unit that gets banished during our turn, this unit will gain 2 attack points and 1 defense point. So the more of our opponent's units we banish in a turn, the more points this card gets and the stronger it becomes. We have 3 copies of this card in our deck because it's extremely good, especially when combined with the banishment cards we also have. The next unit is the Trap User. Costs 2 energy, has 2 attack points and 3 defense points, and it works as follows. During matches, when we deal damage to an enemy unit, we can generate a corrupted copy of that unit and add it to our hand. If we deal damage directly to our opponent, we can get a random corrupted copy of any unit in the game, and it will also be added to our hand. So this card here is really good for giving us more units to play with. The next unit card we're going to use is Amalia, the Voice of the Adopted. This card works as follows. Whenever it enters the field, it turns one of our units into a corrupted unit in addition to any other types it already has, and for each point of damage we deal to ourselves during this match, we'll deal 1 point of damage to a random enemy target. If this unit is about to be destroyed, it must be banished, meaning we will banish the unit that took the damage, and at the end of our turn, if we have any corrupted unit under our control, we can heal ourselves by 2 points and also draw a card. This card has 2 attack points and 4 defense points. Very important for our gameplay. The next one is the Researcher and Explorer. This card is used to bring cards to our hand faster than usual. Why? Every time it is played, we can reveal 2 cards from our deposit bank, and for every 2 cards that are revealed, we can draw 1 card from our deck. In other words, from the moment this card is played, any of our cards that are revealed will also allow us to draw a card during the turn. The next card we have is the Honored Overseer. It costs 5 energy and it's used for our banishment strategy. Why? Whenever it is played on the field, we can banish an enemy unit until the Honored Overseer card is removed from the field. In other words, we leave our opponent without a unit. And of course, we have 3 copies of this card in our deck because it's very important. We'll always be able to control our opponent's board. Finally, the last card we're going to use is Ong, the Rare Item Supplier. This card here is going to help strengthen our team. Why? We'll be able to look at the top 5 cards of our deck. We'll choose 3 cards, 1 of each different type. They can't be the same type. Of course, if we have a relic, it can be 4 cards. And the card that's left goes to the bottom of our deck. For each different type of card we choose, we get to give +1/+1 to a random unit on our board. In other words, we can generate a lot of energy and a lot of attack power for our units. Now, let's go play a match with our deck to see it literally in action.